Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. We have got another one of our guest expert episodes this week, and we are delighted to welcome Jude to the podcast. So Jude is a fellow coach and an author with a specialism in coaching skills, and we are going to be talking to her about dealing with promotion disappointment. So Jude, huge welcome to the podcast. Please introduce yourself to our listeners and let them know a little bit about you and your background.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie and Pam, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. So I suppose a little bit about me, your listeners might hear from the accent. I'm originally from New Zealand and I've been over in the UK now for 18 years. I live in southeast London with my husband. I absolutely love gardening and doing jigsaw puzzles as well. You often find me hooked in to a podcast, listening to that while I'm doing those kinds of activities. When I was in New Zealand, I used to work for Deloitte, and it often surprises people to know that I was an auditor. So I used to go in and support the financial audit. So it wasn't that side that I was doing. I wasn't auditing the balance sheets and P&Ls, but instead I was looking at the IT systems to really interrogate where the risks were in that system and whether there were any places that there might be some cause or some way to manipulate the financial numbers. And then while I was there, I used to do lots of training of the new joiners that came in. And that's where I really realized that was something I loved to do. And yet when I left New Zealand and came to the UK, I continued auditing and being in project management for quite a few more years until one day a friend of mine just sat me down and was like, look, I don't know why you're doing this because you're miserable. You should be in learning and development, sort it out. And I ended up back at Deloitte over here in the UK, working in their learning and development team. And an opportunity came up for training to become a coach. They had quite a strong internal coaching cadre. And I put my hand up, I got accepted. And then, I got trained as a coach, which is something that I absolutely love, something I did a lot within the firm, especially with those going through those promotion processes. And then about sort of 7-ish years ago, an opportunity came up where the firm was being, the learning and development teams were being restructured. So I took redundancy and formed Think with Jude and going out on my own.
Amazing story. And I don't think any coach ever set out or thought that they were going to become a coach. We all fall into it from some different routes. So love hearing that story. Thank you for sharing. Talk to us a little bit then about this dealing with promotion disappointment in terms of how did you come to be focused on working around that particular area of people who were aspiring to be promoted or maybe who had missed out on promotion?
So my role at Deloitte was the development of managers and above. So managers up to that director level. And Deloitte is a partnership. So those at the partnership level are the collective owners of the business. And then the directors are one level down from that. And then you continue down the firm to where you start as a new, I suppose in those days we used to say graduate, but things have moved on and not everybody who starts newly in the firm is a graduate. In fact, there's quite a strong tradition now of hiring people from high school and putting them through apprenticeship schemes. But I was really focused on that manager and above population. And to get promoted into a director or a partner position, there was a process that you had to follow whereby you deliver a business case explaining what you would be able to do for the business, how you would be able to grow that in that new position. And then there would be a full day of different activities that you needed to do to demonstrate that you were ready for that position. And inevitably, there would be some people that were unsuccessful through that day, and what would happen is they would be deferred, and that meant that they would be given a whole lot of feedback about what they needed to improve, and then told to come back maybe in 6 or 12 months for a reassessment. And so my boss thought, we've got all this coaching support within the organization, we've also got a whole lot of training. And so she said to me, look, I'm going to send all of those people to you. You can talk to them all one-to-one, make sure they're connected with a coach, make sure that they're connected into all the other training opportunities that are within the firm as a way to help support them. And over my time with the firm, that role developed. So it came to be that I got to sit in those promotion, we used to call them promotion panels. So I got to sit in on those, and I used to give advice to the partners that were appraising the people going through those panels, to give them advice on what kinds of development might be useful for all of the people going through, not just those that had been deferred. So it came to be that over the course of the 8 years of working there, I worked with pretty much anyone who had been deferred from those panels. I would have talked to and would have supported. And then we expanded that even further to say, why are we just looking after people once they haven't been successful in this promotion? What are we doing to prepare people and help them get ready for promotion in the first place? And so then I became part of developing out that entire program end to end.
Yeah, I love that. That sounds like an amazing job though. And I suppose like from that, you've gone through so many different promotions with people and helped them to achieve that. I think one of the things that I always found is that people who don't get promoted, they go for the promotion, but then they don't get the promotion. They take it really badly. What, in your experience, like what typically happens when somebody doesn't get that promotion? And I suppose, can they still stay within that company?
So you get this entire range of emotions. You get anger, frustration. You get this sort of often a dichotomy of, I'm just trying not to swear, stuff this, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm ready for that promotion. Why didn't I get this? All the way through to, yeah, they're probably right. I'm not good enough for this. I wasn't ready. And with me, talking to each of these people one-to-one, I never knew exactly who I was going to get in front of me at the time. And all of these feelings and emotions are completely natural and normal. And that was some of what I was doing when I was talking with these people that had been deferred, was just helping them, giving them a space just to express whatever it was that they were feeling. I really like the work of Nancy Klein. And one of the things that she talks a lot about is for someone to be able to think clearly again, they need to be able to express whatever the emotions are that they're feeling. And I made myself a safe place to do that, because I'm not going to share it with anybody else. It's not going to color my opinion of you. So that was always the first thing that I would do with people. And then in terms of that questions of whether they can stay, at Deloitte, being a professional services firm, and I think probably with other consulting firms, you absolutely can stay if you manage how the outcome of that process works. And I know in the moment it feels horrific and it's horrible and it's embarrassing, and you're thinking, how do I come into work the next day when everybody knows I was going for that promotion and I haven't got it? And yet the other thing I always noticed was the massive outpouring of support that would come. And so that was something I would always recommend, is take a moment and see all of these people that have come out to support you and go to them and actually let yourself receive that support, because I think in that way you really can stay. Where I saw people who really let their anger and their bitterness show, I think that then created a perception around their maturity and their ability to deal with setbacks, which therefore created a perception that maybe this person will never be ready, or they're definitely not ready yet. And that can be a really hard thing to get over, because I think with a lot of these things, it is about perception. There is a side of you or a part of you or a piece of you that is doing these things. You wouldn't have been put up into the promotion process in the first place if your partners didn't think that you were probably ready for this. But what's happened is there's something that's holding you back, something that's probably been tripping you up quite a lot. And it's just that in the microscopic environment of that promotion panel, it is suddenly magnified and become absolutely massive. And so what really the partners are saying at that stage is, go away and have a look at this, spend this little bit of time without the pressure of the new title behind you to work on this and work it out. Because then when you are promoted, those barriers, those things that are going to trip you up, they're not there anymore.
Yeah, and my next question was going to be about people managing that initial emotion in that situation. And like you've just said there, it can be quite detrimental, can't it, if they handle that in the wrong way. So I suppose what I'm thinking is, as well as preparing for the interview, do we also need to prepare to manage those emotions afterwards, depending on which way it goes? So it's almost like you preempt it and you've got a plan for if you do get that rejection.
That is such a good, I had not thought of that as something to do. If I think about helping people prepare, I didn't do anything around helping them prepare to deal with the emotions if something didn't work out. I think that's a really interesting idea. And I'm wondering, it's got me thinking about sports visualization. Is that something sports people do, visualizing I think it isn't it. If you're running the 100 meters and you visualize if you stumble, how would you get over that and continue on? So it's not something I'd even considered, but I think it's a really interesting idea to play with.
I love that thought. And I think as you were talking, this is often the way when we have guests on, our thoughts go in slightly different directions. And what I was thinking is about that element of, I think one of the things that can make it harder to handle is presumably you're in a pool with a group of other people that are applying, and often you will have kind of peers or colleagues, and you'll almost have that sense of, I feel like I fit here in the pecking order. And so if other people achieve it and you don't, that can, I would imagine, really compound the emotional reaction that people might have.
One of the things I often would work with people on is this idea around, why is this promotion important for you? Because people get often so fixated, especially in a professional services or consulting environment, on this next promotion and trying to get there as fast as possible, that they haven't spent much time thinking about, what does this promotion actually get me? And you can start to see that now in some of these environments where there's people at that director level sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to be a partner, because they're looking at the lives of the other partners in the organization and going, yeah, I don't know if I want my life to be like that. And that's often quite a pivotal decision point. Am I going to go for that partner position, or am I going to leave the organization and go into industry, into something where maybe life could be a little bit more predictable, or there's more boundaries or more control over things. So I think sometimes that real fixation on, I have to get this promotion, without thinking, actually, what purpose does it play in my career and in my life? And therefore, getting it or not getting it, what does that mean for the story I'm telling myself?
I think we would definitely recognize that. And we work with clients where they perhaps haven't had that thought or haven't had that support as they're preparing, end up getting a promotion, and then a kind of, okay, is this it? Is this what I actually want? Or maybe it doesn't fit in with their life, or it's not what they want, and they're looking to move away from that, but haven't necessarily done the thought process around, what do I want to move towards? So yeah, definitely recognize that. So when people are in that situation and they're dealing with that immediate aftermath, once that initial emotion subsides, what next? How do you work with people who are in that boat to be able to move through and to bounce back stronger?
As I was saying before, one of the first things is recognizing all the support that is around you and tapping into that, because there will be a lot of support and there will be people that have gone through a similar journey. And I think having the opportunity to talk to them and hear their story one of the things I often used to say to people, which they wouldn't necessarily believe right at the outset, was when I talked to people that had been deferred and then later had been promoted, many of them look back and say that was probably one of the best things that had happened in their career. And of course, it doesn't feel like that in the moment. It feels horrific and it is horrible. The reason I tell them that story, though, and I know this because of all the people that I've coached through this and worked with, is because I want them to see, to have some perspective around this. When you think back over your life and think of some of the failures and things that have happened, and I'm thinking myself of a couple of times where I failed a paper at university, for example, at the time you are mortified. The world is ending. It's horrific. But when I look back now, however many years, decades later, I barely even remember it. It was just a small blip in whatever was happening in my life. And that's what I want really people to understand, is when these things happen, these career setbacks, they do feel monumental in the moment, and that is normal and that is absolutely natural. And as time goes on, a year on, 5 years on, 10 years on, in the span of an entire career, this one moment is probably not going to even feature as a big thing. Or it could end up being a really integral part of your hero's story. And that's something I used to see a lot in the firm, is the partners would come out in force when someone had been deferred and share stories of times maybe they had been deferred themselves in their journey, and really make it into part of the reason that they're so successful today was they bounced back from this particular career setback. So while it feels horrific and horrible and just altogether it sucks in the moment, it can actually end up being something really positive.
Yeah, I think that's lovely that they were able to do that, to come together and provide that support. And I always think as well, when people are going through those processes and then when they get to that point of rejection, sometimes they feel probably more gutted because they're absolutely exhausted by that point, because they've put everything that they've got into the interviews, into the conversations. And then obviously everybody wants that win, everybody wants that offer, but then it probably feels worse, doesn't it? Because they're just completely exhausted. So I suppose in terms of getting yourself back on track and accepting what has happened and moving forwards, and if you've got lots of support in place, that will definitely help. But what is your advice for getting from that feeling of being absolutely gutted to create an effective plan to move forward and to take all of the learnings? Because I think we forget, don't we, sometimes that every experience we go through provides learnings, and sometimes we don't realize that at the time.
And I think generally when you go through that kind of process, you will get a lot of feedback. And my belief in reality is most people give quite rubbish feedback, even me, and I'm supposed to be an expert in this. And even when I was sitting on the panels and I was helping the assessors write up their feedback, the thing is, when you look at it and you read it cold, you're reading into so many different things around it. So one of the things they used to do at Deloitte, and one of the things I used to really support people with, is go and have a meeting with your assessors, with the people that are giving you the feedback, and hear it from them, because the way they're saying it, the examples that they use, they can give so much more context than perhaps what's being written on the page. And also you've got a chance to ask questions. And so that's something else I would support people with. It is hard to be in a meeting where you're listening to feedback and a lot of it is going to be critical. In the ideal world, there'll be balance. You'll be hearing things that about your strengths and the things that you did really well as the things that you need to work on, the things that are tripping you up. So I would often get them to think about being curious and remember that feedback is only information. Now, it's information that can really hurt and feels crap, like a slap in the face sometimes, but it is only information, and you get to choose what you want to do with it. And so if you've been given some information and you don't quite understand what it means, then get curious about it and start to ask some more questions about it so that you can understand what's going on. Often you'll see things like somebody doesn't quite have that executive presence or that, and people rub their fingers together, that gravitas. And you think in the moment, you might know what you're talking about, but then when you get the feedback yourself, you realize how empty that feedback is. It doesn't tell you anything. And so asking questions like, what did you expect to see from me that you didn't see? Or what did you see from me that demonstrated that I'm operating at the higher level? Asking those kinds of questions to really dig into, well, what is it specifically that you're meaning here? And then taking that information and talking it over with somebody else. If you can talk with a coach, then that's fabulous, but just a friend, a trusted colleague, because often I feel some of the benefit of what I was giving to people was they would tell me the feedback and tell me what they thought it meant. But because I was completely separate from the situation, I could look at it and say, is that what it means? Could it actually mean this thing over here? And I think often the other thing that you tend to see, and I'll just use sort of introversion and extroversion as an example here, is if I'm an extroverted person, then when I'm giving feedback perhaps about the way that you present and the way that you come across, my suggestions are all going to be about things I think you should do that probably look quite extroverted. You're going to look at that and be like, I can't do any of this, is rubbish. How does all of this work? And so often what I would be doing with someone is saying, okay, that what they're telling you to do is outside of what would feel normal and natural to you. But let's look at the essence of what they're saying here. Maybe what they're saying is they need you to be more concise. They need you to connect more with the people in the room. So how would you do that in a way that works within your introverted nature, within your strengths? Because if you're doing that, all those examples of what the other person has said that they want to see you doing, they will just fall away. It's just that when we're giving feedback, we say what we would do in that situation. And we all know as coaches, part of the beauty and the great thing about coaching is that we recognize that what works for me is not the thing that's going to work for you. So there's no point me telling you the exact actions to take. Instead, we need to let you get there on your own to find your own way of doing it. So that's one of the things that I would say is get that information, dig into it a little bit more if you can. If you feel able to, you might not, and that's absolutely okay. And then take it and digest it with a friend, with somebody else who can give you that second pair of eyes and just challenge you a little bit on what some of this stuff might really mean.
Yeah, I love that. And I loved what you said about feedback just being information, because that is such a great reframe. And we've talked about feedback a few times on the podcast. And also as well, I like the bit about you saying feedback is coming from someone's perspective or their perception, depending on if they're introverted or extroverted. I think that's something that we don't ever really take into consideration. We just take that feedback for what it is, and we don't usually get curious or ask questions about it. So I absolutely love that advice. So one final thing on that is, obviously, that is a great way to process it all and think about creating a plan to move forward. But how much time do you give yourself? Like, how much time do you take to regroup and really get your head around it all?
The easy answer is everybody is different. I think that you should put some time around how long you're going to be in that place of ranting and being angry and frustrated or down on yourself. You need to express that emotion to somebody, or make sure journal it, something that enables you to get that out. And then I would ask yourself, what are these emotions telling me? And they will be giving you some kind of message that will help you to work out what it is you need to do to deal with some of those things. How much time you should give yourself, it's really hard to say. I was just listening to a podcast with Professor Steve Peters, who wrote The Chimp Paradox, and he was talking about the process of grieving. You can't really put a massive timeline on it, but in general, to process all of those feelings, and if you haven't gotten a promotion, you are going to feel some grief around that. But he's saying somewhere around 12 weeks, so 3 months. I would say, yeah, that's probably not too inaccurate. And during that time, you haven't just spend all that time just processing all of those emotions, because you want to tap into the support that's available and thinking about what some of those next steps might be, especially if you've been told come back in 6 months for reassessment. You can't just be sitting there for 3 months being angry and then hope that in the next 3 months you've got enough time to develop. So that time thing is a really interesting one, and I think it will be individual. Just recognize that it is going to take a little bit of time around that. And I think this is one where you need to go to that friend of yours who you trust so much, but also will just completely tell you the truth. And really, they're the one you need to say, look, it's over now. It's time to move on and to bounce back from this. Because I think sometimes often that was some of the role that I used to play with the people that I worked with before, was I'd let them have that space, and then it was like, let's work out a plan. How are we going to get through this? And perhaps there was a bit of me taking control initially, maybe just help them to move through that process a little faster.
So you mentioned, okay, time to bounce back now, time to move on. Thinking about those people where they do look back on it and think that was probably the best thing that could have happened, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. What is it that they do that others can learn from when it comes to pulling that plan together and moving on? What is it that makes people able to turn that into a catalyst for something better in future?
I think when they give themselves an opportunity to digest that feedback, and it can take a little bit of time, often it can be a lot to look at in one go. When they look at it and they really stop and think, often what they realize is that feedback has been there for a long time, and it just never got that serious enough to have to do something about it. But when they're really honest with themselves, it has been there for ages. And if they really think about it, they know that probably if anything was going to trip them up, it was probably going to be that. So while it felt surprising in the moment to get all that feedback and to get that news, once I've had a chance for the emotional side to calm down and their more rational, logical brain to click into gear, they know that really there was quite a lot of truth in there. And I think that realization then helps them to think, I've got an opportunity to do something about this. I can either wallow and stay angry and not change anything, or I can take all the support and things that I've got around me and do something about this. And I think that's the mindset that I saw of the people that ultimately were more, I suppose, successful, were able to bounce back from it and able to use it as a big learning experience rather than as something just to pull them back. Because I think most of us realize, especially if you think over your career, you don't get everything right first time. And of course, there are going to be setbacks. It can be difficult if you have been flying high for quite a few years. When you really think about it, there will be that project that didn't quite go the way it was supposed to, or you were managing a team member and it went south and perhaps the relationship got a bit rocky and broke down there for a while. We've all had these difficult points in our career that we have then learnt from and been able to move on from. And this isn't any different. It's just that, I think to your point, Pam, often these promotion processes, there's so much put into them and you are exhausted. And then to have gotten the news that you didn't get the promotion, that's a lot to have to handle. And I think there is also a question out there. I know since I've left, Deloitte have changed their process. So it's now not all just based on this one day. It's a 6-month program that you go through of development. And then at the end of that, those that have shown that they're meeting the competencies and are ready are promoted, and those that haven't are then given additional support to keep them in that process. So it's a much gentler way, I think, of doing it, but I know not every organisation is like that.
It's really interesting hearing some of that and just unpicking it. One of the things that strikes me when you were talking about how painful it can be, if you're someone where success has come quite naturally to you in the earlier part of your career, where you feel like you have been able to achieve things quite easily, I think that can make it feel harder when it doesn't happen naturally, but can also be really important for learning how to deal with disappointment and learning how to ask for feedback and be open and create strategies. And if I reflect on some of my clients, when I'm coaching clients who are new into the role, so they have achieved either the promotion or that external move that they've been looking for, often if that has come naturally, it can feel like it's quite teetery because they haven't had to deal with disappointment in order to get there. So they maybe haven't built that sense of structure around the self-belief that underpins their ability to handle whatever obstacles come at them. So then there's this expectation on themselves of always being successful first time round. And at some point, that isn't going to be the case for everybody, whether that's not getting a promotion or whether, like you say, it's something else within the role itself. But I think it's such a crucial skill to be able to trust yourself to bounce back and to deal with obstacles when they come up.
Absolutely. And I think it builds quite a lot of empathy as well, because often you would find sometimes with that group of people, they've been very successful, they've gotten promotion after promotion, they're lauded as the kind of star performer, and sometimes that can come across in the way that they manage others, in that they're so not used to having that disappointment that when something happens with their team members, they don't know how to give them the appropriate support or get in there and help their team members through that, or they're pushing them super hard, or they're holding them to an expectation that is just entirely unrealistic. And I think as much as maybe the process at the time that Deloitte might have gone through might not have been ultimately the best process, one of the things I think that it did do positively is it really helped people understand that when you're stepping into those senior leadership positions, it's not just about the work that you're doing, it's about how you're developing your team and bringing them along with you and making sure that you've created this environment where your team can thrive as well. And that doesn't mean massive long hours and unrealistic expectations and that kind of thing. It means really recognizing what are the strengths of your team, how are you helping them work towards that, how are you helping them develop through their weaknesses, how are you giving them really great opportunities. And it was really interesting that in the span of this one day, because of the way the exercises were created, that you could really get such a good insight into those things, because when you have people working under pressure, that's when everything starts to pop out, and that's where you start to see this is what this person will be like in a more senior position where there's even more pressure than there is now. Yeah, it doesn't leak out in quite the same explosive ways as it does in the promotion panel, but then what happens is, for me as the coach, when I'm working with that person, that gives us such a rich ground to work with, because then we can talk about how did you want to be in that position? How would you like to have come across? Because that's the real you. The bits where you didn't come across the way that you wanted to, that were much more emotionally driven, that's more your... So I'm thinking about the chimp paradox and Dr. Steve Peters again. I absolutely love his work. But that's your limbic brain, your emotionally charged center, or what he calls the chimp brain, that in whatever that situation was, it has caused you to react in a certain way. But when you're in that more calm, logical, rational state, you can start to think about, this is how I really wanted to act and how I want to come across. And now we can work on that and plan for it and work out what are the things that need to be in place that will enable you to be able to do that. Yeah, it ends up providing quite a rich source of material for us to be working with.
And that just sounds like a perfect foundation to build the next steps on. And I suppose that the thing is, for anybody that's listening, that's like thinking about going for promotion, or they've been through that process and they're feeling really burnt by the process, like those points that you were making about, if you've never experienced disappointment as a manager, if you've never been through anything that's tested you and challenged you, then can you really support your team and develop other people to get through those things as well? I suppose in some ways, it's almost as you're going through that process, it's what am I learning about me? What am I learning that's going to make me a better person, a better leader, a better manager in the future? And it's quite a nice way to think about it. So you're almost setting yourself up to go through a process, but it's more about the learning experience than the prize at the end. And if you get the prize, then that's a bonus. But if you have to jump through a few hoops before you get there, then it's not going to be a disadvantage. It's actually going to help you and support your growth as a leader. So I really like that take on it. In terms of like the next steps, that like once somebody's gone through that process, and if they're thinking, should I stay and try again, or is it time to move on? What would you say to somebody who's going through that thought process? Because I think sometimes shame and embarrassment can push you down the direction that's probably not the right way to go. But because you've got all of these emotions going on, it can cloud your judgment. So what would you say to somebody in that situation?
I think wait until you're in a more rational, calm frame of mind, because your emotion is going to cause you to make a whole lot of knee-jerk reaction decisions, which may not be the right decisions in the time. And we've been there. We've all made a decision in the heat of the moment, which we've later regretted. So I always say, just give it a little bit of time, let the dust settle a little bit, and then look at the environment around you. If you feel it's a supportive environment, they're giving you guidance and mentoring and help. I know one of the things I used to see a lot was partners would get in contact with the person who had been deferred, take them out for a coffee or a lunch, just really put their arms around them. Even their teams would come to them and say, oh, look, I'm so surprised that you didn't get this, but whatever help you need from us to help you for your reassessment. If this is the kind of environment that you're in, then I would really consider staying, because really what that environment is saying is, look, this is really hard, what you're trying to do here, and we recognize that, and not everybody's going to make it first time, and now you've got some really valuable information that's going to help with your career development and growth, and this is, we're here for you. If you're sitting there thinking, actually, people are looking at me a little bit weird, I'm not seeing that support coming out, people's perceptions seem to be quite fixed, that they're not really looking like they're going to change, then I think maybe that is a time to think about looking at going somewhere else. And maybe, unfortunately, you've had an emotional reaction that, you know, you look back and you think, oh, yeah, I don't love that. And it can be hard to shift people's perceptions, or even for you just to think that you can shift somebody's perceptions. And I think there are times that having a clean slate could be really helpful. That being in and taking that learning from where you've been and going into a new environment can be something that can be really energizing for your career.
Yeah, and again, that's such a great take on it. And I suppose that's where you need to think in the moment, like, what is going to work for me? What is going to help drive my career forward? And what do I feel good about? And I think we're at the stage now of the episode where we look at the quick wins and some practical advice for people to take away. So let me start by asking you, in terms of quick wins, what's one thing someone could do today if they've just faced promotion disappointment?
Find a way to express that emotion, whether it's talking to someone, journaling, going for a walk. I personally quite like the old kickboxing class. Just do something to release that emotion from your body and from your mind. And then the other thing I would do is ask yourself a question to give yourself some perspective. So think about, in a year's time, what is this going to be like? What is this going to mean in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? And if that's too hard, then think back, because somewhere in your life something didn't go well. There has to have happened at some stage. Think back about what was it like in the moment and what do you think about it now?
Jude, that's just brilliant advice and such a useful episode, and one of the ones that I wish I'd had back in the day. So thank you so much for all that you've shared. Where can our listeners find out more about you and your work?
So my website is a great place to go, thinkwithjude.com. And if you'd like to interact with me, have a chat, then definitely go to my LinkedIn and you can find me there, connect with me. And I post things, very regularly about coaching and about dealing with this idea of promotion setbacks.
So just tell a little bit more about your book, because I know that was how we first connected. So tell people what your book is and where they can get hold of that as well.
Oh, fabulous. So the book is called Think Like a Coach, and it was written for managers, helping them to develop some coach-like skills that they can use in the way that they lead their teams. it really came from a place where I recognized that everybody can benefit from having some level of coaching skills. But what we were doing as organizations is that we were trying to teach our managers to coach the way that we teach us as professional coaches to coach. And it can be quite complex and really hard to keep in your head. And I wanted to show managers that it's not that hard, that it's actually using skills they already have. So that's what the book does. It shows you how to use skills that you have to coach your teams, and then how to use coaching in common conversations that you would be having. And you can find that book at all good booksellers around the world.
Perfect. Thank you once again, Jude. And if you're listening to this and are looking to bounce back from promotion, then do get in touch, because Jude has a coaching program specifically for those of you who are preparing for promotion, bouncing back perhaps from not having had the promotion that you want. So do go to her website. And as normal, we'll be back next week with another episode. So if this one has been useful, please do share it with someone that you know is in that situation. And if there's a topic you would like us to cover, then drop one of us a message and let us know. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you again next time.
Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.